Oh. Let's see if this starts. Hopefully it is.
Make your barbecue this summer with the Weber Genesis gas grill.
Ooh. Hello everyone, let's see if this is working. It's very, very hot. So I have to admit I am trying to leave the window open. Mainly so I can, to an extent, be slightly cooler. And I do have some, as you can see, ice cold iron brew. Now this is very special iron brew because it's been procured by my girlfriend on behalf of my puppy as for Father's Day gift. So I both got a book, which was he managed to get my mum to procure for me, and he got my girlfriend to procure some iron brew for me. So really he is an extra special puppy dog, and I am very lucky with the women in my life. Although I have to say, at the moment, I am having a real-life demonstration of why presence matters, which I'll explain in a second. Hello to everyone who's watching, all my family. I know there are a lot of you watching. Hello to the little cousins. Enjoy the embryo I told you to drink. Hello Jim, hello Alex, hello Engaging Strategy. On a train dying from hay fever. I hope to be uplifted. Yeah, that you shall be. Hello RF4, hello Blue Shirt Buddha, hello Tony, hello Stephanie, hello Kevin, hello Gordon, hello 1965 Jack. And that is why it's a good job I drink non-alcoholic drinks, because I can really put away liquid. Now, Potter, hi Doc, sorry I'm late. I have so much to catch up on. I still haven't watched the Bilge Pumps or Drinks video from yesterday. Don't worry, you'll get through them. And Bilge Pumps is having fun. Bilge Pumps is doing well. I think I've said so well. It's got all sort of things going on. They actually considering paying for it to have some advertising because it's been doing so well, which is kind of an interesting scenario to be in, that a charitable organisation wants to advertise it because it's doing so well, it's raising the profile of their charity. And that's what SimSec is. They're a charity. They exist to promote better understanding of maritime security. If at any point I dive off that way, I've got a little towel to go like that. Right, hello King George V. Hello John Hart. Right, how I missed anyone in the first run of things. Hello Brock. I know you're not listening, but I'm sure you will be listening in a way. Michael Rose, Eamon, Gary, Jay Richardson, Jack Ray, Albert. Hello everyone. Right. Yes, I have having a very good day in that I've hit 4K followers and subscribers, which is very cool. Hi Kingsrook. Hi Paul Johnson. But also a very strange day in that I had a lovely car battery go due to the heat. So that was a bit annoying and required a light up with some waiting for the car repair people to arrive to check if to give me a new battery. And even when they did turn up, they actually didn't have a new battery on them, so they ended up starting my car up, jump starting my car for me, and me having to drive after them to go pick up a battery from the place that has the battery. Yeah, that was fun. No, still not the worst thing you hear about though today. Now, I was given an example of the Presence mission that you have to be there to have an influence on things. And we can always talk about the abstract on nation, but you can also take it down right to the local level. Currently, my girlfriend and her family are having some trouble with neighbours who are being really quite nasty. And, well, because I'm one end of the country from her, and it's locked down and covered, I can't do anything about it other than listen to her and try and be a good, attentive boyfriend that way. And that's really annoying, because trust me, in this circumstance, I'd rather be the scary, menacing, slightly deadly sounding boyfriend staring at them. But I can't do that. My natural Philip Vian-ness and Royal Navy destroyer-ness is having to be held in check, so I'm having to be a very nice, distant battleship commander sort of scenario. Jeff Beeler, good afternoon. Has Michael Clapp subscribed yet? That's between me and him. I do know he watches these videos, and I do know he's currently making a decision as to whether or not to do a whole video with me. He's a bit worried it might be a very, very long video. I said we could break it up into 3, but you know. Jerison, to be fair, it took me a week to get 2 batteries full of Defenders. COVID has got loads of people batteries, so there's a lot of demand. Yeah, my poor Subaru, because of its particular position on our drive, gets right in the heat of the sun, and it's been sitting there for the last... my motors haven't gone out, so since March. Basically, about the same time, I could have stopped being able to go to the gym or swimming every day because of protecting my mum and sister, because they're shielded. It hasn't been going out because I haven't been going to work, of course, and I haven't been going out to the gym or swimming or anything. So, yeah, about 3 months it's had. And this has had about 3 months as well, so... Hopefully, I've decided I'm going to say... I've put some money towards exercise, like some of the extra teaching money I've been getting. Well, supposed to get. And so I'm going to buy an exercise bike and stick it in the garage, and hopefully that will help with that. Anyway. Oh. Evening, Andy. Paul Johnson, sending a salute. Yes, I would love to. Kevin Taylor, I can't see you angry except King and Somerville, and they are moments they seem to be. Yeah, trust me. It takes a lot to get me angry, but my family and friends, that's about my point. The rest of the time, frankly, it's not worth it. There are too many reasons to not get not worth fighting for. But friends and family? Yeah. Right then. Evening, Ian. You had to wash out bees last week with a hose last week from the mirrors. The bees in my area, thankfully, aren't that adventurous. Hi, Sean Mac. Hi, Night Heron. How do you feel? Career could be a mini-series. That is basically the trouble. If we're going to do the career, I think it could end up being... it could be a very, very long video, or it could be many, many videos. It's a discussion to work out. It's something to work out, because it's worthwhile doing, because Mike Clapp is one of those people, his career is just... Yeah. Good evening, Belle. Right then. It does particularly feel like that. Right, the other thing I've had today is the paper hasn't come in terms of delivery for my printer, which some of you might consider a good thing, because that means that in the nicest way, that you don't have to deal with my normal joy, that is my little sort of pieces of paper going up. But I can still work with this. I can work with this, even with it using the phone as my system. I can work with this, believe it or not, even though it is going to be a bit meta at certain points. And you'll get the meta phrase. You'll get the meta phrase as we go on. You will. Bad times, all I need is the air. Right then. So, what do I mean by meta phrase? Meta. Well, so we're going to try a little experiment, and we're going to see if this works. As you can see, I've used the video down there to check if I'm in the right position. And I've got the lovely chat screen going up here so I can keep track of the chats. And if I move this back a bit further, so it suits the lights a bit better. Basically, what I'm using this for is to show when I want to show the pictures. Okay? So that's why they're up in the top screen, and then the little bit down the bottom you couldn't see anyway, I'm using to line up the pictures. Oh. Yes. What's really funny is there is a little me, a little me, and a little me, and it's just it's just, you know, it's just cool, and it's different timings of the whole thing as well. The time delay. Oh, this is gonna be fun. I do have a second monitor, but it's up in the roof, and honestly, it's so hot today, I'm not going up there to get it. I'm just not. The other option was a second laptop, and again, it's too hot. We're not doing this. So, I'm going to start off with the very, very scary picture. As I've said before earlier, those who are not haunted by those eyes are very, very lucky people. Frankly, that picture scares me. Yeah, the picture just scares the living out. Just need a screen and an HDMI cable. Yeah, I have a few of those actually. Actually, I also have a portable projector in here, but it's just, yeah, going to get it. When the PC comes down here, I think I'm also going to have to get some new screens, because I've only got one screen for that, and it's fine for me for what I've been using it for in the past. But I realise it is 5 years old, and I'm having it might be having fun. Can you rotate the camera about 10 degrees to the right? Right. That should be about right. I would agree, but come on, that is a scary face. That's just not him. It's just disturbing. Oh, actually, can we make this a little bit more meta? Let's see. So Cunningham actually has an interesting, like, as I said, he's one of those interesting people. When I was looking at him earlier, I was the whole time he has this sort of life where you realise that everything that should have made him not be a naval officer actually did make him a naval officer. But it made him a very thoughtful naval officer, and it made him a very technical naval officer, and it made him... I felt quite bad earlier because I was worried I was being nasty about him. You know, on Operation C, I say that, frankly, the reason he's not as good as he normally is he's lost the energy. Well, this is the stuff which has given him his energy, but his energy is different from many of the other naval officers who I've discussed, and who I probably show up as the examples of the naval officers I like most. And that's because, in some sense, those are the ones I like them because of what they do, so they give me a lot to write about as a historian, but also because I think they achieve and they get the results. Sam Thompson, Dr. Clark, I wouldn't want to upset the Admiral. No one would want to upset that face. God, if you go to Wikipedia page, that's the painting there. And ever since I found it on that Wikipedia page, I have had to mention it on things because, oh my God, the poor man. That might be why him and King got along, because frankly, he scared the bejesus out of King. That face could scare even Ernest King, perhaps. Daniel Freeman just discovered the portrait painter has made passes at both his son and daughter. That would certainly explain the look. John or Andrew Cunningham. He was succeeded by he succeeded Andrew Cunningham. Jeff Beeler, was Somerville part of World War I Room 60 extended team? Not really. There's an argument he was involved in some of the work to do with them in terms of the Gallipoli campaign, but not really in terms of a way we'd say heavily. Engage China. That's Somerville paint. Getting worse. Gives the old vibe. How can you mess this up this bad? Look. I will definitely let that one through, but Matt, don't worry. Sean, I'll get back to that question. Kevin McTaggart, that's the way I'm reading it. He seemed to be a bit more power stoic and a little less cavalier. Yes. William Bolton, leaving. We'll watch her later as ever. That's what the picture's done to you, William. It scared you off. G and Carl, was Somerville a Jutland? I don't... Let's see. We'll go on to the World War I one as we're discussing World War I. And also, honestly, I want to get away from that painting because yeah, frankly, it scares me. Okay? Right, so World War I. And we'll do that. So, World War I. He spends most of his time in battleships, really. Apart from some time in HMS Chatham, which is a lovely cruiser. He spends time on Marlborough, Queen Elizabeth, and HMS Inflexible. I think he misses out on Jutland. Because he's with HMS Queen Elizabeth in Gallipoli campaign down Gallipoli, so I think he might miss out on Jutland. With his deployments, he's on Marlborough, which is a lovely ship. He is very much a battleship flagship officer. He is very beloved by the admirals of this age, who often have him. Interesting enough, as he's a communications specialist, the interesting thing is he was either drafted to go off to Queen Elizabeth, or to replace Beatty's comms guy. Now, that's the interesting thing, is if he hadn't gone down to Gallipoli, if he had been around for Jutland, he might have been Beatty's communications officer. Just think about how that might have changed the Battle of Jutland if Beatty had had an actually decent communications officer. All right. Jeff Beeler says, too bad he's not being. He is a very good communications officer, and this is one of the interesting things about Somerville as a whole. He goes all the way through this, he gets to all these sort of ranks, and he hasn't gone the traditional way. He's not a torpedo officer, he's not a gunnery officer, he is a communications officer. And I think that's part of the trouble. Because I think as a communications officer, there are certain centres where he would have been a very good commander-in-chief. But I think in a certain point, he was one of the few options available to be sent, and that's half the trouble in World War II. But honestly, I think there would have been theatres better suited to him. Ben gave you strategy. Don't worry, BT would have still found a way to bug it up. Yes, but his communications officer would have been telling Jellicoe what was going on. So BT might have still been buggering up, but Jellicoe would have known what BT was doing, because the communications officer would have been doing his job. Jeff Beeler, at Jutland, flags would be a mess, but everyone with a radio would be in the loop, especially Jellicoe. Yes. Gary, I pulled down Rufus' book off the shelf for this live. Force H and Somerville don't seem to be that covered. I do actually have a book somewhere which is literally entitled Force H and Admiral Somerville. And it's this little red book about this big by this wide, sort of that thing. And I have not been able to find it at all for this, which was really annoying. But luckily, I did have my trusty Dragon Raw. So that's been, that and various other books have been it. So I've been using lots of books. But I do find Force H itself gets a lot of weird coverage. It's very patchy coverage. Steve White, interesting twist. Historically, one of those significant points that history seems to pivot on. Yes. Jay Rishan, I can just imagine Jellicoe have a brain hemorrhages and BT's action. It could have been interesting, but, you know, there again, Jellicoe might well have just let BT hang himself and won the battle. Because, you see, that's the thing. If he's getting the information through, he can position himself that much better. And if the first crossing the T goes off perfectly, then the Germans lose so much more, get so much more damage, and literally, that is one little change. One little officer change can make all the difference. You have one officer who's a very, very good, very by-the-book, rule-abiding communications officer who really does understand the rules because he wrote them. Angus Somerville. Would there have been a significant impact on the rest of World War II if Admiral Somerville had attacked Operation C? Yes, I think I've made this. I made this point in the video with Jamie from Armoured Carriers. I'm also going to be looking at it in the Indian Ocean Operations 1941 to 43, and all that goes on there. And I had to say, it's one of my what-if scenarios. What if that torpedo, that attack he'd sent off at night, had, instead of missing, had gone the right direction rather than the wrong direction, because they just got the point of bearing just off. Even the British at night flying didn't always still made mistakes, and they were by far the ones who were most experienced at it in World War II. And if that torpedo strike had hit and taken out 2 or 3 of the Kébir I'm going to go with the Japanese carriers because it's too hot, and I'm just going to mangle up the group name in just horribly. So I'm going to go with Japanese carriers. It's just too hot. I do apologise. It's just too hot though. I'm just mangling up. Anyway, I honestly think if they'd sunk 2 or 3 of them, I have a feeling that he would have been tracking down the Japanese the following day, with the Japanese probably running to so he could attack them the next night. Because the Japanese would have probably, with those losses, would have decided that they were facing a significant force. And that's what you have to imagine, is that the Japanese don't really know how much of the Royal Navy fleet's out there. They know the Royal Navy can put a fleet out there. They don't know how much of the Royal Navy's really out there. This is the thing, with the Royal Navy having global operations, they can deploy, everywhere. But, it's one of those interesting things. It goes on about. Philip Neal, help, I'm thinking I'm melting, I'm so hot. I'm drowning myself in water slowly. I was asking, whole Grand Fleet would have heard on the radio that there is something terribly wrong with our bloody ships today. Probably would have been messaged out. Jebila, was Somerville the kind of officer Fisher wanted to promote being a technical specialist? Yes. Indian Dell, is it warm in the UK right now? Yep. Paul Johnson, we moan about the weather when no matter what it's doing. Yes, we do. Basically, the weather is a British conversation starter. Andy Buford, Kido Butai. There you go. I said it right, but please don't make me say it too much, because I kept managing to get Kido wrong. I kept going Capido. We won't go there. It's heat. Indiana Dell, good luck. That sounds terrible. I'm currently considering emigrating to Iceland, Greenland, northern Canada, Norway, basically places that are cold. Antarctica sounds good right now. Eamon, what would have happened if Jellicoe had deployed the other way and not crossed the German sea at Jutland? Probably there just wouldn't have been a battle. Probably they'd have ended up passing each other. Man, I might have been a battle another night, but Jellicoe probably would have lost his post. Jeff Ealer, I read one article that put down Somerville to taking too many risks against the Japanese. Certainly dispersed the fleet too early, causing ship losses. Hermes went to prepare for ironclad. Yeah, that is. Again, in the nicest way, it's the thing is, it's the officer in him who is going. He's not the full Somerville, okay? It's cruel what's been done to him. He really shouldn't have been there in many respects, I think. See, Mike, MacArthur's aide kept Bomber Command, Breton away from Mac. He wanted to strike Taiwan immediately. Could have shattered fog-bound Japanese attack. Yeah. So, the Arctic is currently 40 degrees centigrade. Huh? Anyway. Ian Carr. If you look at Admiral Cunningham and the Dakar operation, you would not infer from that his later success in Mediterranean. Conclusion. Even those considered as greats have bad days. They do. Even those considered do have bad days. They do. But also, in the nicest way, even during Dakar, Cunningham was doing fairly well, considering the politics he was dealing with. The interwar years are interesting for... Interesting thing in that Somerville is really one of the very few battleship officers who actually gets the senior command. It's one of those interesting things. You're always hearing about these battleship officers. And then you actually look at the admirals, and they spent most of their time in either destroyers or cruisers, or, you know, and then they've done a battleship tour, a turn of duty in a battleship, especially if they've been a gunnery officer in a battleship, and then they get promoted. The battleship is basically, yeah, here's your promotion. Here's a nice, massive artillery command for you for a few years, and then you're going to go become an admiral. So you're not really a battleship admiral. Somerville basically is a battleship admiral. He has spent most of his career in battleships. He is in many ways the battleship specialist in the Admiralty. Which is why when he becomes the Rear Admiral destroyers in the Mediterranean fleets, he runs into quite so much trouble. Because he just isn't a destroyer officer. He isn't. At one point, there is a signal which goes round, which is basically he's holding the back and going, no, we must wait for the perfect time to strike in an exercise. And then it's basically some cruisers hove into position, and the stewards ruled that the entire flotilla of destroyers was wiped out. And he's just sort of going, He doesn't sort of get, in terms of destroyers, that it's almost a use it or lose it scenario. And you shoot them into the attack because they're actually safest when they're attacking. You cannot hold back as a light ship when you're against big ships, because holding back at range just gives them time to pick you off. And it's a very painful lesson he learns in that regard, and he doesn't use it in future. Does sort of manage better with destroyers in future, but it's a case of he's doing his time as Rear Admiral destroyers, but he doesn't really get destroyers. Nighthawk Productions. Who would you have placed in the ocean? Command. In the ocean. Sorry if you've answered that elsewhere. Honestly, if I had my choice of officers, I'd have sent out Lumley Lister. I would have sent out Lister, because I would have said he would have been the best one to pick from there. But he was back organising the Fleet Air Arm's massive growth. So he'd been given a sort of land appointment. And actually, I think Somerville could have done that. I honestly don't think you need a carrier officer to organise that. I think Somerville could have done that job fine and done it really well. And I think Lister could have done better in the Indian Ocean Command, because he was the right blend of aggressive and still energetic enough for the war. Other options, well, by then I think Philip Vian is not quite possibly is a Rear Admiral. Possibly is a Rear Admiral by that point, in which case I would have actually been tempted to make it a Rear Admiral command and put him in charge rather than a full Admiral. But, you know, that would probably cause a battle with other people, but, you know, I mean, tempting. Angus Summer. Soul means those places in the Arctic Circle are not getting any darkness to cool off right now. So I mean, he's dropping. Yeah, that reminds me. But in other good news, they still do tend to have a large amounts of cold water for me to go swimming in. That's my current plan. But yeah, maybe I should be heading for the Antarctic at the moment for summer. Yeah, it's heading into their winter period. Evan, why do you say that Somerville shouldn't be there? He was just tired or sick from TB? Well, he retires with tuberculosis in early 1939. He doesn't really recover properly, and he comes back to the Navy. He then has put in charge of organising radar. He's put in charge of, then he goes to help Admiral Ramsay with Dunkirk. These are not exactly unintensive positions, are they? They're quite heavy works. And then he's given Force H, flying his flag firstly in HMS Hood, and he's dashing all round the Western Mediterranean, the Central Atlantic, tracking down surface raiders, fighting Italians, doing all sorts of things. He's gone from being on the sick list to 3 years of high-intensity operations with virtually no break. Virtually no time off. You know, this is my point. He's then sent out to command the Commander-in-Chief Eastern Fleet. And you're sort of going, you've wrecked the man. Ian Carl, did a large proportion of the RN would only serve in large ships or ashore for a career? No. In fact, it's very rare you have anyone serve ashore their entire career. In fact, that would tend to be a very short career, because if you don't have sea time, you aren't getting promoted as an officer. And in fact, you aren't getting promoted in anything if you don't have sea time in Navy. And most officers tend to move around. It's like if you consider Philip Vian, destroyers, cruisers, battleships, he'd done them all. Okay, Lister, destroyers, cruisers, and an aircraft carrier. Cunningham, destroyers, cruisers, battle cruisers, and I think had done a battleship as well. You know, he's done a lot of mixture. They have served on a lot of different types of ships. They have a lot of experience. Yes, each of those ships have a different character, and there are people who spend more time in one branch than the other. So normally you have a branch you specialise in. So Cunningham spent more of his time in destroyers than he did other things, because that was his specialism. But he still served in the other branches of the ships and the other ships. He still did time as an XO on a cruiser, as, you know, these sort of things. Gary, could it be said that Force H is the prototype for the Royal Navy fast carrier task force, albeit on a small scale? This is going to sound terrible, but the Royal Navy Fast Carriers Task Force was prototyped in the 1932 and 1931 exercises by Admiral Henderson, who was Rear Admiral aircraft carriers at the time, and had been exercised and operated in regularly since. And that's why when they're forming the hunter-killer groups to track down surface raiders, they're formed up by a carrier and a battleship, a carrier and a battleship, a carrier and a battleship. So you have the one to find it, possibly sink it, but definitely slow it down, and the other one to kill it. Basically the Royal Navy's modus operandi. Paul Johnson, do you think that's why he died so young? Yeah, that would be my strong suspicion. Ian Carr, which quality RN senior officers other than Henderson died before the war in 1959? You had Admiral Black. There's a whole bunch of them, really. There are several. There are seriously a few admirals, and it's quite. The Royal Navy loses quite a few admirals, quite worryingly few, especially of the vice admiral rank, which is a critical rank if you think about it in World War II. And sort of vice admiral at the beginning of World War II, you would be a senior officer throughout that war, and they're losing them. Jeff Miller, Churchill berates Somerville for not taking 3 Vichy light cruisers plus destroyers with just renown. Yeah, he does. Jane, as he had no real experience of destroyer work, either fleet or independent unit, is it any wonder he didn't really understand what was still a relatively new department? Destroyers weren't really that new a department. They've been going on since, you know, in the nicest way. Destroyers have been part of the Royal Navy since well before World War I. And by the time he's Rear Admiral destroyers in in 1936-ish. Yeah, sorry. No, that's not. He should have known what he was doing. He should have been better than he was. He did okay. He ended up doing okay. He wasn't a bad one necessarily. He just wasn't good or switched on from the beginning. Inca, was any blame attached to someone thinking about Krill? Not really. It was mainly viewed as a submarine got lucky. And some very, very bad damage control methodology. If they managed to get the counter flooding right, she'd have been okay. Nighthand production. Hood started off as flagship of Force H, then being swapped renown. Is this for practical reasons, i.e. one's better suited, or is it basically to give crews some variation in op environments? It was to try and get Hood closer to home so that Hood could go in for her refit. Basically, Renown had come out of refit. Renown was the newest one. Hood came home, so she's closer to get the facilities so they can nip her in for a refit, the idea was, and they could try and rush her through. Run Cash, was there a conscious effort made by the Royal Navy to cross-train promising officers in all types of class of ships? Yes, but it was also part of the standard officer promotion. They'd be checked. And as a midshipman, you would serve in everything. Midshipmen sub-lieutenants often would move around the different types of ships. They'd often do time on submarines, time on cruisers, time on destroyers, time on everything. So he would have served on a destroyer while he was a midshipman. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to pass as sub-lieutenant. C1, US Armed Forces seem that after long sea duty or army line duty, some officers selected for respective war college for a few years. UK too? Yeah, he managed to do some time with various schools, but he doesn't really do much. He's not really considered the best teacher, which is sadly enough for him. He's good at stuff, but he's not so good at communicating it always. It's for someone who's a communication specialist. Seeing as destroyers were only rising in prominence a short time before the aircraft carrier. Destroyers come to prominence really, well, you've got the Battle of Tsushima, which is all about the destroyers, in fear of the destroyers, in 1905. You've then got World War I with the Harwich Force, which basically are destroyers that block off the channel as far as the Germans are concerned. Yes, there's theoretically some pre-dreadnoughts, and HMS Dreadnought herself sitting behind them as a channel squadron, but in the nicest way, getting past the Harwich Force is going to be a nutty. So I'd say after 31 years of which you've been serving through most of it, you should be familiar with them. Jeff Beeler, Renown is practically new while Hood is feeling her age. Yep, that's good. That is true. Jane Earth, destroyers were very much an adjunct of the fleet in Model 1 with the exception of Harwich Force, and even that was always led by a cruiser. Yes, but cruisers were used as destroyer leaders, but it doesn't mean you don't learn about the destroyers. And it's led by a particular type of cruiser, which is a destroyer leader cruiser. They're part of the... Yes, they are part of the fleet, but they are not... They are a part of the fleet, which is an important part of the fleet, and you learn about it. Jay Richardson, do you see torpedo boats? That's more a question for Drac. Kevin, how do sub-crews deal with vitamin D deficiencies as they don't see the sun? Usually, some actually, I think they take vitamin D tablets and things like that. Yeah, man, I've read that the RM practices the raid on Toronto in the 1930s with Courageous and Glorious. Was Admiral Henderson the architect of that too? Him and a guy called Lister came up with that one. And then Lister got to be captain of Illustrious when she actually... Well, no, it was Admiral in charge of Illustrious when she delivered it, if I remember correctly. Yeah. I know Lister got him to be involved. Pound was the commander-in-chief at the time when they came up with it. Gary, Renown could have been a decent fit for the Eastern Pacific Fleet, her age notwithstanding by the end of the war. Yep. Richard, Duck Luck, would you do a video on the Battle of Tsushima? Probably going to do it at one point. It's quite a big battle, and I do have a soft spot for it. Right, so let's move on from Somerville to the far more interesting things. Afternoon, Austin. And the far more interesting one, if I go slip through here, is of course this one from Bilge Pumps. Come on. There is a link to Bilge Pumps down in the bottom of the video, down in the documents. If you haven't already seen Bilge Pumps, go look it up. And that is one of the themes from the Discord, which is a link to it is also down in the bottom. So down sort of down in this bit, there is some links to various things. Discord, Patreon, Bilge Pumps. And it's, you know, I think it's worthwhile. I do. Let's see. Let's move you back. How far am I off the screen? Right. Just do that a bit. Right, so, Bilge Pumps. It's a very, very cool video. Hey, what do you know? Now I'm more visible in it. I was worried for a second I disappeared off. Do you have a good map of Somerville's movements versus the Japanese? I do have a picture of a good one, but I can't find my copy of Dr. Marcus Faulkner's book, and that's got lots of good pictures of these things in. So that's what I'd be using, Marcus Faulkner's book. Hello, Carl in Belgium. Angus Sunner, more interesting than Somerville. Yes, Force Ages are more interesting than Somerville. Do you have a good map of Somerville? King Truck, did you pause the insert video perchance? No, I don't think I did. I hope I didn't. There is currently a little black and white ladybug coming across my desk at the moment, so that's a sort of interesting random thing. Right then. So, let's go with this one. Now, this is part of the as yet unuploaded introduction video, the one which is to do with the Force H. And this is an outline of all the operations they took part in, and this is an incomplete list, actually. This is one of the reasons why it hasn't been uploaded. This and the other lists are incomplete. Formed as part of the Surface Radar Task Groups on the 5th of October 1939. So, you know, the Royal Navy basically goes, we need to track down these surface raiders. We need to clear the seas of the Germans. We need to take control of the seas. In a full Scottish accent, probably. After all, Admiral Bruce Fraser was delivering the talk. Hello, Federico. Right, so you have Operation Catapult, otherwise known as the attack on Mers-el-Kébir. I do maintain that sometimes the British do actually name their operations quite well. Quite a lot of time you wonder who was in charge of the naming practice, but sometimes they do produce a very good one. Also, a reminder to everyone, of course, tonight is the night when Mysteries of the Deep is on, so I will be finishing at 8:30 because I want to get my tea and I want to watch myself on television with my mum, because apparently that's what I'm supposed to do on a Thursday night now. I enjoy it. Anyway, so Thomas right there. There's some good maps of in the Operation in the Ocean 1942, in the operations of the Navy in Dutch East Indies and Bay of Bengal. Cool. And Thomas Ryder, compiled by the War History Office of the National Defense College of Japan. As I said, Marcus Faulkner's Atlas. I'm not sure where it is. I will track it down. Faulkner Atlas. Yeah. This is the book. It's very expensive. It's got a foreword by Andrew Lambert. Marcus is a guy who I worked with for years at King's as well, and it's a absolutely wonderful book if you're interested in maps of all the operations and everything else. And plus, it's got some very, very cool pictures in it. So it's a War at Sea, a Naval Atlas, 1939 to 1945. There are, I will admit, some people have managed to find a couple of errors in there. But honestly, myself, compared to others I've read over the years, there isn't anything I've spotted which is better. Right then. And so, we have Battle of Calabria, Battle of Taranto, where they're taking part because you have Italy going on here. You have convoys going across underneath it. You have the lovely HMS Illustrious going up to attack Taranto. You have HMS Ark Royal and Force H coming across to attack, well, Genoa mainly, and other areas of the Italian coast. So basically the Royal Navy was doing a pincer movement on Italy. Federico Vego. Force H was the one mostly based at Gibraltar. Yeah, mostly they were based at Gibraltar. They start off actually down in Freetown, in the South Atlantic and South America sort of station, but they get moved because of, well, the French being annoying mainly. Thomas Ryder, there's some good maps of operations in the edition 1942. I've already read that. And Thomas Ryder, free PDF download. Oh, that is cool. Put a link in one of the comments, would you please, underneath this, to that one if you can, Thomas. What's the delicious taste of your dinner? I have no idea. I think I have some Frank Bentos meatballs in a can, which I'll probably mix with pasta. Yeah, that is a good book. The Marcus Faulkner book is a very, very good book, and it's well worthwhile if you are interested in those things and you have the £50 to spare, it's worthwhile. But it is expensive. I do admit that one. The Battle of Cape Spartivento. Now, I love the Battle of Spartivento. Mainly because, for both sides, it's this scenario about what could have been. You have Ramillies and Renown both involved. So you have an R-class battlecruiser and an R-class battleship having fun. You have Force D, which are cruisers and destroyers poddling along. Greyhound, Defender, Herwood, Diamond, Gallant, having a long time. You have Ark Royal, Jaguar, and Kelvin going down this way to trot along. So there's Force D in front of them, and there's Ark Royal down here. And basically, you have some cruisers and various battleships go up. Sheffield, Southampton, Manchester with Ramillies and Renown to basically beat off the Italians. And what is interesting is that for both sides, this could have turned into a victory. At one point, the battle is going all the Italian way, and another point, the battle is going all the British other way. And really, that is because of the work Somerville does in bringing his force around, in coordinating and controlling his force. But saying that, and there is a Condottieri class cruiser attacked by skewers up here. Torpedo bomber striking force attacks at 12:40 here. So they have torpedo bombers, skewers, well, swordfish, let's be honest, coming in here, skewers attacking up there, and then all sorts of things going on to them. So the poor Italians are having the full arsenal chucked at them. And, yeah, the Italians get beaten off. But really, it's Catapult, which is the interesting one in terms of the damage it does to him. And frankly, the picture I want, I'm going to be shamelessly using Wikipedia here, but that's because it has the picture I want. There is Strasbourg, of course, making a run for it as all the things going on and all the stuff is hitting. Now, Mers-el-Kébir is one of those battles which, frankly, well, if you're going to do Mers-el-Kébir, if you're going to take part in Mers-el-Kébir, you're going to be facing off against problems. And it becomes a sort of psychological operation at this point. And actually, this point, yeah, I'm not going to ruin those slides by putting them up. So, you know, you're going to get the talk with me from this point onwards, and books. Books and me. So, you know, we'll hope that works. And hopefully I haven't frozen too much. I always worry when it freezes. Scares me. Run. Oh, good. There are copies on Amazon for around 30ish. That is good. Was Force K under overall command of Somerville? Yes. You're not frozen. Let it go. Well, hey. If I'm not frozen, that's good. I'm not sure why, but... Ah! I'd frozen the screen, not you'd frozen the screen. There we go, that's better. I have to remember sometimes. I try to be too techie for my own good. I do try to be too techie for my own good. How much did the French commander cause Mers-el-Kébir? you have a scenario where Somerville doesn't want it. The naval officer doesn't, the French naval commander doesn't understand what's coming. You have the French governor is pretty much not handing over the full text of the information to the naval officer, the French naval commander, because he's worried he'll accept one of the ways out and doesn't think the British will do it. You have Churchill pushing Somerville to do it, and it's, you know, it's one of those scenarios. You know, Somerville didn't want to do this. He really didn't. It was... You're taking what the trouble is, it was fundamentally a bit of a too nice a gentleman for this kind of war fighting. And you're making him do this in a way that he cannot avoid it and cannot say no. And that for him is a problem, because Somerville is not really built for this kind of war. Somerville is built for the kind of war where fleets are fleets. Somerville is built for the First World War in many, many respects. Yeah, there. It's all nice and safe. Somerville is built for the First World War. He is built for the North Sea. He is built for fighting the Germans in that sort of action. And as an admiral in the First World War, he would have been great. As an admiral in the global war, where you're no longer Britain, the overwhelming superiority of power, where you have to do things which frankly the Royal Navy always has done, but had only really avoided a bit of in the First World War because of its alliances. Yeah, he's just not the admiral for that. Fairy Kitten, thank you for the liking. See you later. So Angus the Son will never believe that the British won't do it. The British don't bluff like that. No. That in many ways is Britain's ultimate bluff. You see, the thing is, we come across as gentlemen, as such nice people. People often think we're bluffing, but if you look for our history, we are some of the bloodthirstiest killers out there. You know, in the nicest way, there is a reason a small, wet island came to dominate most of the world. And it wasn't because we were polite and invited everyone to tea the whole time. It was because we made it so that you wanted to come to tea with us and have that conversation over tea, rather than the alternative. Jeff Beeler, Churchill trying to show the Yanks he was serious about fighting on a worthy sport. That's certainly a mantra which is pushed by a certain breed of historian. It's nothing so refined and nice. That's a nice benefit if it does do that, but no. It's quite simple. The British didn't want the French fleet falling into German hands. It's nothing about the Americans. I know in an American-centric worldview, it's all about the Americans on this one. But on these things, and there are many historians who will argue that, but this one is a purely British tactical calculation. We do not want these ships falling into the hands of the German Navy. It's bad enough they've got 4 Flower class. We won't give them anything more. Shawmac, also, the US Coast Guard's paint scheme looks so nice. It does, Sean. Yeah, but like, how are Cunningham and Somerville situations different and similar? Cunningham was a destroyer officer, okay? He comes across as this very nice gentleman, but he is very much a destroyer officer. He is that much more aggressive, but also he's able to fight that much a different war. He is able to deal with the French because they're in harbour with him in Alexandria. So he's able to make his case there ever so subtly and ever so bluntly. He is fighting the Italians, and in the wars that he is, it's all war. Plus, he hasn't been ill. And Cunningham's always had a slightly different edge. Cunningham is also able to start doing a lot of commanding from Alexandria and have a lot of his subordinates go out, and that makes a difference. Somerville insists on being at sea with his ships, and in many ways he needs to. When you're running Force H level, and then you go up from Force H, you're running the Indian Ocean Theatre, the Eastern Fleet, you need to be with your fleet, especially if they're going to be fighting a battle against the Japanese. Where do you position yourself if you're not putting yourself into your ships? But the trouble is with doing that is it means the stress and the pressure is always on you. And he was a sick man in 1939 already. Sean Brown, opposite of normal, Mers-el-Kébir is a failure of many fathers. Mers-el-Kébir succeeded in stopping those ships becoming useful for the German Navy. That was the success. The failure was it wasn't done well enough. Honestly, if you had annihilated the French fleet, and I mean really stopped them getting to sea, you would have put the problem to bed permanently. You would have also not needed to come back again and not had a ship damaged by a submarine. Osprey 28, the tea helped though. It did help. It's always nicer to have it's always nicer to decide things over tea and biscuits. It's always the nice option. As I made the point in my Dream Fleet video, it's always nice to give people the option of the tea and biscuits. It's always nice to encourage that, and the tea and biscuits is what you prefer it to be. But there is tea and biscuits, and there is tea and biscuits with a reminder that if it isn't tea and biscuits, there's all this thing around you which is big, grey and steely, or big, white and steely, and can do a lot of damage. King's Rook, beware the polite ones, as TV tropes like to say. Where do you think they get that trope from? Federico Vega, was the case in World War II that the RN was a lot weaker than before, or that all the others were a lot more stronger than before? The RN was still the strongest navy in the world. It's just the others were stronger than they had been in terms of equivalency, and the Royal Navy hadn't managed to. It hadn't shaken off the shackles of treaty early enough to start up the build-up program. It hadn't had the Treasury loose the funds early enough. You know, it's one of those things. What would have happened to the Royal Navy if the Flowers, instead of waiting till September, had been started building when they were ordered in July? You know, what would have been the difference in the Royal Navy? Well, July, August, September. You've got 2 months head start on that, of peacetime. 2 months of peacetime, of rapid peacetime construction, where you haven't got bombs, you haven't got issues to deal with, you haven't got mucks up with supply. That can shoot your ships ahead. Remember, they take about 47 weeks to build? Well, if you've got 8 weeks of peacetime, that means 47 weeks from war beginning to them entering service. That is, let's say, 39 weeks now. But it could actually be less. It could be more like 12 weeks and knocks off the total build time, which means it could take it down to as many as 35 weeks. 35 weeks and you start getting the escorts in. That makes a difference to what you lose. That makes a difference to the convoys. That makes a difference to everything. The whole scenario is complicated for the Royal Navy. So, Thomas, Dr. Clark, you scared Dr. Clark. You scared the Romans enough. They walled off half the country. Anyone after that should have known better. Yeah, half Scottish, half Cornish. Half they decided to wall off the country. The other half well, let's put it this way, anything below the Tamar that the Romans didn't really like to go. They kept their garrison nice and far back from the Tamar. It's very good. I think it was the Danish fleet scenario. Yeah, it is Copenhagening. Very good. Not unlike the Napoleon War, when the British took the Danes' fleets so that the French couldn't have it. Bingo. They've done it before. Roland Cash, I think all parties at Mers were hoping for the best case scenario, but almost always they end up facing the opposite. I think the only one who wasn't hoping for the best case scenario was probably Churchill, who really just wanted the French fleet out of it. He wasn't really sure of any scenario he liked the French fleet being able to get away. Because he wasn't sure if he trusted them to go to a neutral harbour. That was Somerville's job, was though to escort them to a neutral harbour. That's what he wanted to do. I think there was a debate as whether they'd be interred in America or would be interred in various options for it. But you know, the whole point was they were supposed to be far away. Vision, to tackle Mers-el-Kébir was done solely to neutralise French fleet, but had the latter benefit in demonstrating to the FDR administration that Britain would fight on, and so could be backed by the US. Does have the benefit, yes. Steve Father was a Southern at heart. Tea, hot or cold, was still his preferred beverage. So that's not a proper comment. My apologies. Let's see. No, that's fine. That's a good comment. Surely success would be French fleet off the board based in the West Indies. No, because then you have the French fleet in the West Indies. If they're going to become allies later in the war, that's fine. If you could hand them over to the Free French, that's great, that's fine. But if you're just telling me you've got a French fleet which is still reporting to the Vichy command structure, now in the West Indies, then all you've done is shift the problem. And you've shifted it further away from where you've got the most resources to deal with it. Best case scenario for the British would have probably been the French accidentally turning their guns in the wrong direction on the way over to the West Indies and getting sunk in the Middle Atlantic. Yeah, man, why didn't battleship officers reach senior ranks during this time period? Was it due to lack of influence? That seems to contrast the IJN during the same period. No, battleship officers, some do reach senior rank, but the thing is, to get to senior rank, especially at a young enough age to get to really high rank, you need to have a chance to show yourself off, to demonstrate your skills. As a junior officer, you're going to have far more chance to do that in a destroyer, where there's far fewer officers, and so your actions are far more visible, or a cruiser, which is on distant stations, which enables you to get a lot of independent command, because they're always short of officers. So they're always giving junior officers discharge. Oh, do you want to take a junk up and do this? Or do you want to do this? Or do you in... Let's see. Famously, as I like to bring up, in Sir Edward Ashmore's case, do you want to go and stand on a British merchant ship and stare down a load of Japanese soldiers and coast guards? You know, at Tsingtao in January 1939. You have, for some reason, he ends up as Admiral of the Fleet. I can't think why. Something marks him out as a young man. I really don't know what. This is what you're dealing with in this period. You know, it's the opportunities. Ian Carr, was RN fighter radar control procedure developed aboard Ark Royal, and was Somerville influential in his time with background radar? It was already under development by the time he got to there. It's going to sound strange. What they did was they took the Royal Navy's practices for airborne control, because they used to have a torpedo spotter reconnaissance aircraft, would fly as high as it could over a task group, and it would act as sort of the airborne early warning eyes. And they basically took the policy of that and sort of started to adapt it to early airborne radar control. But definitely Somerville and Lister were both involved in this. Which is, again, why I say Somerville could have gone to become the Fifth Sea Lord. He's a bit senior for it, but he could have done it. Emin, and should Churchill have trusted Darlan before the attack on Mers-el-Kébir? No. Never trust Darlan. Never. He's an opportunistic. Jeff Beeler, I'm surprised that the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum, located near Haida, does not stock the grey VC t-shirt. It doesn't? Oh, that's a shame. I have this one is sort of my bluish one. But I'm wearing it mainly to wind up Jamie, who we're recording Bilge Pumps tomorrow, and I do know how to sight me in this lovely shirt when his own is still yet to arrive. Does make him so happy. And I am so innocent. Can't you see the halo? Okay. Martin, is it just as simple as Somerville was the wrong man for Mers-el-Kébir job, as the French, being the emotional people they were, kind of unlikely to give up, especially as they were so close to France? I'm not sure I'd call them the emotional people they were, but I would say that, in nicest way, Somerville words it very nicely. Maybe if you'd had someone who was a bit more blunt and a bit more, they would have probably got the message. Again, Fraser brings to mind, but at this point he's Third Sea Lord. And there's another post Somerville could have done quite well. Somerville could have taken over as Third Sea Lord and let Fraser go do this. Angus says, Churchill could have been holding multiple objectives in mind for a single course of action. We just shouldn't assume that sending a message to America was at the forefront of his thoughts. That's the point. It's a lovely benefit, but I don't think it was the major point. Whereas when you read some historians, and I'm looking at their books now, you'd think that basically everything Churchill was doing was about America. It's really not. He would love America to enter the war on the British side. It would really help things, but he wasn't necessarily 100% planning for it. There again, he wasn't necessarily planning for 100% for a liberation of France. It was a nice idea to go back there, and certainly Ramsay was planning it. But a British Empire solo re-invasion of France was not really high on the cards. Getting America involved in it, maybe. Inca, would Dunkirk and Strasbourg have been useful Free French units later in the war? Yes, they would have been. They would have been lovely Free French units later in the war. But unless you could get into the Free French without guaranteeing they couldn't go via German control, that's your problem. Don Robinson, was a Taranto-style attack not an option? Taranto-style attack was actually considered, but someone decided that he didn't think that would be sensible. Send in the fricking torpedo bombers. Just send in the torpedo bombers. Seriously, if you swordfish torpedo bombers and if battleships, torpedo bombers and skewers had all been equally involved, it could have been a very interesting scenario for the French fleet in Mers-el-Kébir. Very, very interesting. Unlikely to survive. Neil Hazard. Yes, I recently read G.H. Gordon's work on iron procurement, and it seems to me they face real limits of ability to expand their shipbuilding program, particularly in that critical 36 to 39 period. Their entire economy is hitting the total guns v butter limit, where the government has to make hard choices of what to choose, whereas the Americans, led by Vincent, are leading a massive expansion. You see, the problem is, it's how far can you expand it in terms of the British economy before you're actually at war. Okay? When you're at war, you can do a lot of things with the economy and expanding military production and ship production, all these things. And in the wider empire, than you can in peacetime, while you're still in peace. Even if you're preparing for war, there's a limit to what you can do. The Americans have a far bigger economy, so you can look at it just that way. But really, Britain's economy and the way it's structured, you have to look at the wider Commonwealth, especially the Dominions as well. So in the nicest way, yes, Britain is starting to reach its peak and its maximum in peacetime, but it's still working up Canada, it's working up Australia, it's working up New Zealand, it's working up South Africa, it's working up India. So that's the thing, in the nicest way. When you start to look at the British procurement strategy and the British economy, if you are focusing just on Britain, you're missing out on half the strategy going on here. Angus, should a halo be burning like that? Depends what kind of halo it is. Steph Johnson, Dr. Clark, speaking of shirts, if you're kind enough to send your sizing along with the thoughts on my BCG, it'd be appreciated, as I'd rather not try to guess for your Haida shirt. I believe this is a medium. Yes, I will do those send leaders. Usually I am medium. At the moment, my waist is slightly expanding more than it normally does, because I forgot that with me stop exercising so much, I should really not eat as much as I normally do. So I fell into the trap which most infantry soldiers fall into when they leave the armed forces. They are used to exercising non-stop, and then they go, why? I'm just eating the same amount I used to always eat. Yeah. Well, the trouble is, as you get older, your metabolism slows down, but also, if you're not doing the same amount of exercise, you put on fat. You start storing that energy. Ian Carr, AP shells were not blunt. No, they're not blunt, but, you know. Bertrand, how do you defeat Germany without invading France? Well, you A, hope they invade the Soviet Union. You B, bomb them to Kingdom Come. C, I have a sneaking suspicion from the Commando raids the plan was to invade Norway, knock them out of Norway first, and then slowly constrict them down. And I wouldn't be surprised if the invasion would have been, the British would have invaded through Italy. Knock Italy out the war. So then you have the Mediterranean and you start to close things down. So you have the SOE causing issues in France and all sorts of things. And slowly you're going in. The war would have lasted a lot longer, but I have a feeling Germany would have lost still in the end. Mainly because Britain had a nice logistics supply chain, and the Germans didn't, and they were slowly starting to win. Even in 1939, the things which will win them the convoy war about Atlantic, as I was going through in Tuesday's videos, are starting to be laid, are starting to come through. So, and once you can win the Battle of the Atlantic, the convoy war, you're getting the convoys coming from Canada, from around the world, you can do it. Fighting Japan as well, that would be a problem, but the moment Japan declares war, you're always going to have America involved. So that's why Japan's like America. Then Germany does the stupid thing. They declare war on America. For goodness sake, Hitler, you've been a gambling opportunist the whole way through the war, and then you shoot yourself in the foot by declaring war on the side of Japan. Oh, for goodness sake. Steamway, 1918 Armistice still burned deep in US4. FDR had to fight that feeling. We get involved, then chucked off after deals ends. Japanese did everyone a favour. Yes, but also you have to remember in the nicest way, that was partially the American isolationist fault. Because there was the League of Nations was formed, and basically the cornerstone of it was to be America joining into it, and then the Senate refused to sign it, so Wilson's 14 points became moot. The League of Nations became a talking shop. No one wanted to be really want to be involved. And then you had a whole series of naval treaties, which the British managed to basically run the way they wanted to. After a first one, which was held in Washington. Martin Doherty, wasn't an RN rating killed on the French sub Skurkov while attempting to demilitarize French ships in UK ports? There were issues, and Cunningham's bloodless takeover was an exception rather than rule. I would agree. It was, although a vast majority were actually bloodless, but in nicest way. Again, in Cunningham's case, the tampons were taken off the guns. The French still had their tampons on them. They didn't know what was going on till after it had happened. And so they can't get the tampons off their guns quickly. In the time it takes for them to get the tampons off the guns, the Royal Navy's guns would have swung round, and there wouldn't have been a French Navy left in Alexandria. Cunningham was being very to the point. Kingsford, regarding logistics, could the argument be made that logistics was Canada's greatest contribution to war? Yes, that and their convoy battle groups. Pigeon, could Britain defeat Germany without USSR and USA? If Germany doesn't invade the USSR, yeah. Because honestly, Germany can't invade Britain. And unless they start pouring a lot of money into building up a very significant navy, honestly, if Germany doesn't invade USSR, actually, what Germany, the really silly thing is, Germany, Stalin waits to invade Poland till after he's concluded his war against the Japanese. And then that's when he invades Poland. But actually, if you think about that, at that point, the Germans, the Soviets were fighting on two fronts. That would have been the time for Germany to invade the Soviet Union, go straight across Poland. But they didn't, because they worry about the French and the Brits in their ear. So, you know, these things are all these wars of what-if points. Jerison, I think Norway first, then Italy. Italy's capitulation would have leave Greece and Albania vulnerable, and I have a sneaking suspicion that Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania won't have been too keen to fight. It could certainly have been a slowly working through. Admiralty of Fluff. One gets the idea the Axis had no way of receiving merchant ships with allies everywhere. Is that a correct impression, or was there some sort of useful Axis sea trade? No, allies were everywhere. The Royal Navy was basically going around the world going, hello, are you a German ship by any chance? No, we are a neutral. Let me board you and check. We think you're German. You're going to come with us to a port and we're going to check. Good boy. It works. And that's why the Royal Navy has cruisers and has ships all around the world, so they can control the world's oceans. This was another point I was trying to make earlier when I was talking about the Royal Navy building up my dream navy, building up a presence force. Airman, how do you think rate the large French destroyers of the interwar period? Not the best handling destroyers in the world. They're certainly an interesting design. They're designed for high speed, not high maneuverability. And the trouble is a destroyer needs a balance of both. Sure, Mac, what's better than fighting two superpowers? Fighting three superpowers? Yeah, I suppose so. Jeff Beer, the 8th Army travels on Canadian trucks. Yep. Nero says, production, logistics and training, for sure. Look at the British Commonwealth training plan. They then again, they provide a significant part of the ASW in the Atlantic. It's a huge amount of that ASW in the Atlantic. Interesting. Are tampons a technical term? I thought they would be bungs or plugs. Tampons were what they were always called. Before tampons became something else, that was what they were called. Might be where tampons comes from as a phrase. Oh, goodness. I just realised that half the female members of my family are watching this. Apologies to my girlfriend, my sister, who will both be cringing, and my mother and my girlfriend's mother, who will be laughing. I know you all. Stafford Thompson. Wow, my history teacher was pretty PC then. He called them barrel covers and caps. Yep. Or possibly he was just army orientated. Jeff Beeler. If Germany does not invade USSR, then the reverse is likely to happen. Possibly. Jerison, I would say Britain can win without either one or the other ally, but without both it is impossible for Britain to conventionally win. It would fall to RAF mass destruction, RN blockades and nukes. Yeah, quite possibly. John Brown, typical British strategy would be bribe Stalin to attack Germany if Hitler didn't attack first. Oh yeah, that could also happen. Or bribe someone to fake a German attack on Stalin so Stalin would attack. Donald Fritz. Were American capital ships a threat to German Italian surface fleets? And were admirals of these nations worried about US entry into the war? Or were they not deployed due to the Japanese threat? Pretty much they knew the Americans were focusing on the Japanese threat. To be honest, they didn't think the Americans would have the stomach for another European war. But when they did get involved, they were worried about them. Boyd Johnson, wasn't Stalin paying the Germans not to attack Russia anymore? He wasn't so much paying them as trying to be very friendly with them. He had just killed quite a lot of his senior officers in another sort of bloody revolution. He killed quite a lot of his military officers, so, you know, he had a very loyal army. He didn't necessarily have a very effective army, because he killed them based on loyalty rather than based on their ability to do their job. Donald Fritz. No, Paul. You answer. That's a fuck. You can also take the twos argument that Nazi Germany was trying to outrun the inevitable economic collapse by taking all these territories. Yep. My appearance in production at Admiral of the Fluff. Only in my videos. You certainly couldn't call it useful, but Germans and Japanese did send subs on long merchant runs between the two nations, and while not a good solution, it could work. It's how the Japs got ME-262 engines. I wouldn't really call that merchant trade, because honestly, there wasn't much going backwards and forward. It was mostly an attempt to get them supplies out there. It was the odd submarine. It wasn't a lot of submarines. Very much the odd submarine. The Germans didn't have many submarines with that long a range, for starters. Assuming the Soviet Union goes into Poland first and gets the Allied shtick, how would the Royal Navy have combated the Red Navy? First, it would have to find it, Daniel Phillips. I'm sorry about this. First, it would have to find the Red Navy. It's kind of a similar problem as Pitt-faced versus Catherine the Great. Trying to threaten Russia with a navy is forgetting that Russia is its own landmass and has huge land borders. So these days they have oil pipelines. You could maybe play with those. That would probably have more of an impact. Those days they didn't. Roboa, concerning the access not sea trade, those not raiding cruisers must have come in handy there. Amazingly, the Town class proved incredibly effective at hoovering up merchant trade ships. Incredibly, it's just, for anti-surface raiders, they just prove so good at doing what is, in effect, surface raiding. It's just it's a surprise. We were all very surprised at this. Inkar, how could USN and IJN have compared if Pearl Harbor happened in 1939? Well, then, honestly, USN would have been in a far worse position than the Royal Navy in 1939. If you think they were short destroyers and in a bad situation in 1941, you ain't seen anything like they were in 1939. Those 2 years are critical for their destroyer numbers and their carrier construction program. Honestly, if Pearl Harbor happens in 1939, the Americans are crying for the Royal Navy to come and help them, because they would have suffered that much damage. The Japanese would also have been weaker in 1939. And in 1939, if it had happened in 1939, the Royal Navy force in 1939, especially if it's pre the Italian entry into war, the Royal Navy force that would have ended up in the Indian Ocean probably would have been significant. The British would have had quite a lot more forces in the Far East, so they could have blocked far more. So you'd have then had, when the Italians entered war. The interesting thing was, would the Italians have entered the war if the Japanese and Germans had already been fighting the Americans and the Brits? Mussolini is egotistical and obsessive about Mare Nostrum, but taking on America and Britain and all the British Empire combined, even he might have thought, are you guys absolutely freaking kidding me? I know I've had rather too much pasta and I've got sauce for a brain, but are you kidding me? Let's see. Oh, Thomas Roller. Historically, good lord, there's a lot of questions coming in. You'll remember I'm going in 50 minutes, so you'll get the questions in now, aren't you? Thomas Roller. Historically, the word tampon originated from the medieval French word tampion, meaning a piece of cloth or to stop a hole or stamp, a stamp or plug or stopper. Cool. Steve 1. Cutting off US merchant ships not acceptable. Got UK to relent on that when Lincoln turned the removal of Confederate commissioners from UK ships into a negotiation to end that. Yes, but also the British were kind of keen on it as well. Well, the problem, Osprey 28. Well, the problem with Germany is that Nazis would have to not be Nazis to win. Honestly, yeah. Everything's always blamed on the person at the top. And if I say the name, I do realize YouTube has a panic attack. But, honestly, there are lots of systemic problems in the entire system in Nazi Germany. Daniel Freeman, I always thought it was tampion rather than tampon. Depends on who's spelling it. And pronouncing it. It's kind of interesting sometimes. Angus Son, American history shows a profound affection for wars, beyond sense and reason. This last century, there was a lot of money to be made in American wars for American manufacturers. Yeah. Jeff Beeler, what do you know about Vice Admiral D.W. Boyd, Somerville's carrier commander? He's a fairly decent officer. He's a very, very decent officer. But again, he could have been a better commander in some respects than Somerville. Sure, he was also restructured the army, which is why the Soviet officer corps so yeah, that and many other things. Yeah. Okay. Steve, Red Japan was going to take on USA early, say 1936, but Curtis P-36 was a decided advancement over their planes at the time. That's often marketed as the case, but I don't know. I think that's putting far too much emphasis. I don't think the Japanese Navy really wanted the War of America. And I think if the Japanese army found that as a reasonable excuse, that's viable, but I don't think so. I think just that time internal politics wasn't pushing for a war as much. Andy Fold, Soviet army was reforming, re-equipping, and retraining. By 1943, Barbarossa would have been impossible. Would Stalin have invaded Hitler's Germany, though? Probably. Schumberg, Rob Bulwer, I've seen tampons being called tampions. Yeah, it depends. Spellings change with things over time, and it's how it goes. But you know, Sean Brennan, RN got North Sea fishing fleet to deplete Russian Navy ammunition. Yeah, that would be helpful. Dr. invading Canada instead of invading Russia. Locals just wait for winter. Ask the Americans. They've done it a couple of times and not had good fun. News, Japan was never going to attack US. Even the decision in 1941 was taken with such reluctance. It was utterly tied to US economy in such an intrinsic way. Yeah, that's the problem for Japan. That is one of many problems for Japan in this scenario. Osprey 28. It's almost like the qualities that make for a good anti-radar make for a good radar. It's surprisingly. It's amazing, really. Who would have thought? Carbon Gasberg, wasn't the USSR living on Canadian wheat by the time of Operation Barbarossa? Yes, they were. Although the interesting thing with that whole thing is if you had a better railway line running through Russia, you wonder how much trade could have been taken if they could have built a sufficient enough railway line up to one side, up through Canada, Alaska, and taken it across to the Bering Strait. The trouble is, it's the geography getting in the way, but you know, it's an interesting idea. Martin Doherty, wouldn't it have been possible for us and the French to end up fighting the Russians if we gave up our aid to Finland? Yes, the British and the French did consider fighting the Russians over Finland. Airmen, over on the French side at Mers-el-Kébir, if the French and Mers-el-Kébir had joined the British, would the French African colonies have joined them too? And what would have been the consequences? If the French African colonies and the French fleet had joined British in terms of Free France and gone Free French, you'd have ended up with someone other than de Gaulle being in charge of the Free French, which might have been lovely. Because de Gaulle was a bit annoying on occasions. Also, you then have the poor Italians sitting in the middle going, we're going to take over North Africa. We're on both sides of you. You will have the Free French garrisons attack from here, and we will supply them with troops, and we will have troops the other side. So, in other words, North African campaign gets taken over very quickly. Does it last long enough for the Germans to send any kind of formation to support them? Probably not. In which case, North Africa gets taken, so you never have the scenario where you have the Italians having both sides of the Mediterranean. And the Axis powers on both sides of the Mediterranean, which means you can start working up a bit earlier. North African colonies would have been quite useful. Mitchell Oates. American affection for war, mainly a thing after World War II and the military-industrial complex becoming prevalent. Before, the US was quite reluctant when it came to foreign wars. Yep. Jeff Beale, in 1939, the Japanese are not in Vietnam, but the French are. Yeah, they are. That's the other fun thing. Sean Brennan, was American Pacific Fleet based in Pearl Harbor in 1939? Would Japanese attack its west coast? I think they did have quite a few ships in the Pearl Harbor in 1939. Angus O'Sonnell, can we get a sneak preview of tonight's Mysteries of the Deep? I can't remember what's in tonight's episode, so unfortunately no. Donna Robson, why didn't the Germans come up with a T-class style U-boat? Devastating salvo. Were they not aware of the type? Mainly, the Royal Navy's producing its T-boats for two missions. One, to block a German task force getting into the North Atlantic, and two, to block, well, no, three, to block an Italian task force getting into the Atlantic from the Mediterranean, and three, to block a Japanese task force from causing them trouble if they're resupplying Singapore. That is why you need the massive salvo. For all the other operations, what you really, really need is to be able to fire a few torpedoes and then load and fire some more from reloads. Especially if you're going commerce raiding in them. Because here's the dirty little secret. As a commerce raiding submarine, you don't want to use your torpedoes to take out the merchant ships. Torpedoes are very expensive, you don't carry that many of them. You want to save them for the warships. For the merchant ships, you want to use your deck gun. It's why I laugh when people say that modern submarines will empty the ocean of merchant trade. They'd have to keep. They'd run out of torpedoes quite quickly and have to keep going home to rearm if they tried to take out every single merchant ship with torpedoes. And that's why you had the deck gun. It's only when you've got a Cold War scenario, where everyone's talking about fighting enemy fleets and enemy forces and full up scenario, that you start going, oh, we will have an all-torpedo scenario. But that means, if you're taking on a convoy of 120-odd ships, you need all 6 submarines will be, let's say you get 6 submarines, you would all lose that all 20 torpedoes. Old Richard, why did the Admiralty allow Exeter, Perth, et al. To be sacrificed in a lost cause like the East Indies? Because they needed to make a fight somewhere, and they needed to try and defend and buy time for other places to... Those ships are mostly being sacrificed to buy time. They're buying time for other people. Danny Phillips, aside from C&D class, were any other cruisers from World War still service? And if so, what were they used for briefly? Oh. Not really World War I service, but the E-class and the Hawkins class were both around. All sorts of ships were around from World War I, and lots of navies had them. Cruisers are expensive ships to build, and you don't want to get rid of them if you don't have to. Mostly they're being used for light cruiser roles and air defense roles. Heavy cruisers have moved on quite a bit. So, Purple, did the Italians do any research to counterattack specifically to counter Force H? Not really. They weren't really that style of navy to come up with specific tactics to try and counter a specific force. They were trying to counter the British generally and the British strengths generally, but you know. Vetasuni, are there any good sources for the RN in the Indian Ocean and BPF readily available in the US? I have a few, but would like your opinion on good sources in that time period. Boyd's The Eastern Fleet, linchpin of victory sort of thing springs to mind. But, yeah. Boyd's in Eastern Waters. Although it's not my favourite, but it is probably the best currently available. It's... that one. Anthony Boyd, The Royal Navy in Eastern Waters. Forward by Nicholas Rogers, which explains everything. Sometimes I do use pretty books as basically pictures. And this one is a very pretty book, and that's a very pretty picture. Shulmac, before you go, can you answer the question I asked at the beginning, and you said you would answer later? The one about switching officers. Ah, yes. Well, we'll get back to that one. Right. Shulmac, do you think that officers should change off more like the Fast Carrier Task Force, because not every officer can be spruants? Actually, I quite like that idea. I do quite like the idea that you change officers off and you give them a break. And you have two different staffs, and you have an overall strategic fleet commander, but the task forces are under different officers. That seemed to me to make a lot of sense. The Royal Navy problem, though, was they didn't have enough senior officers to even really man everything they wanted, let alone do that. They were trying to grow as quickly as they could, but honestly, there's limitations. There's limitation of officers available. So they were doing what they had and they could go with. But it is a nice thing. It's a nice idea to have. Jeff Beeler, how would Tom Phillips have done instead of Somerville if he had been based at Colombo and waited for the carriers? See, that's the interesting scenario. So let's say Tom Phillips gets carriers sent to him and has the battleships he already had, but also gains Warsprite and the R-class. And the Japanese are advancing on Singapore. So he then moves to defend Singapore. A, do the British surrender Singapore? Unlikely, because that force will arrive quite soon. B, that's quite a force of about 3 modernized capital ships and 4 other battleships. So that's 7 battleships and 2 carriers turning up. That's quite a significant force to take Singapore to sort of maintain that area. The Kido Butai at that point, if they do turn up, Tom Phillips is a fairly aggressive officer. Okay? He might not be who I'd pick necessarily to run a carrier officer, but a carrier fleet. But I think if you've run that scenario and you've got enough battle drills in your mind, if you've got the submarines and the battleships and everything, you can have the Kido Butai running onto the submarines, the carriers at night strike, and then the battleships turn up, and you've got a nice big whack. Because if you consider the Congos they have with the Kido Butai are not going to be able to take on Prince of Wales, Repulse, and Warspite. If it's Prince of Wales, Repulse, Warspite, and 4Rs, then they're just not going to be able to do it. Those are very powerful ships. Daniel Freeman, rail route through Iran to Russia Caucasus for more supply. That is what they did have, yeah. Sean kind of be looking at Libya and licking his lips. Most people would be. O'Connor would have been going yum yum. Thomas Rottweiler, French Equatorial Africa countries did go over to the Free French. That they did. Richard, what is your opinion on the work of Seda Seda? I have both his books, From Hand to Pearl Harbor and Culture Shock, US-Japanese Relations. I find them a useful counterpoint. Okay, they're interesting to read. I'm not sure I agree with everything, but they're a starting point, and there's something which I want to do more studying in future, so I'll look at them further, if you know what I mean. And there's... But then you but then you get Rommel and the French and the forces that went to the Africa Corps on the Eastern Front. Yeah, which does make an interesting scenario, because that's quite a hefty force. Or alternatively, they're having to go down to Italy to try and stop the lovely Il Duce Surrendering to people who are upset with him because he lost their only foreign empire. JP, in 1939, the US Pacific Fleet is California, so easier to take Hawaii? Definitely easier to take Hawaii. So that scenario, then you have enough firepower, you could have taken Hawaii quite happily, probably. And, yeah, that'd be interesting. There is a Jeff Beeler. Oh, I do believe there is actual shipping lanes that are delineated between the USSR and Japan for their shipping to the west coast of Canada. Yep. Vision. US Pacific Fleet was traditionally based at San Diego. FDR moved to put pressure on Japan in 1940, or 41, I think. The fleet move is actually mentioned twice in film Tora Tora Tora. Yeah, but, you know. Without the fleet there, it's, as Nehusa says, taking Hawaii is nearly impossible, but it's not impossible if you're prepared to put the efforts into it. Donald Fritz, in North Africa, due to the limited road network, it is conceivable the Brits could park a ship with large guns and pepper the German supply convoys as they drove across the sandy place. We did that a few times. Yes, lots of the Daniel Freeman's pointing out, lots of French colony troops as well. And Jerison, my tactics in Silent Hunter 3 were to destroy the escorts, then demolish the convoy at leisure with a deck gun. Yeah, that's pretty much what their plans were. Daniel Freeman, as Clark, the World War II submarine was more a small torpedo boat that could occasionally go underwater for a little bit. Yeah. Sean from Wikipedia, in mid-1940, President Franklin D. Roosevelt moved the Pacific Fleet from San Diego to Hawaii. Yes, they did, as we've been over. So basically, Hawaii, but Hawaii had a small base there. They had some ships there, even then in 1939. It wasn't completely empty. It was mainly moved the main base of the Pacific Fleet. Sure, Mac, Andy Falls wouldn't have been a good environment for Rommel, and the forces wouldn't have made much of a difference. Actually, you see, the thing is, it's not just the forces that you have to think about, it's the logistic effort, right? So all the refinement, all the technology, all the stuff which goes into equipping the Africa Corps would have instead of been focused on purely on equipping the stuff for the Eastern Front. So it's a knock-on effect. It's a cumulative effect. Rommel might not have been the greatest in the Eastern Front, but there were certainly some generals who were fairly good there, and they would have had far more extra logistics, and there's one less strain on the German forces. So you think about it, Fliegerkorps X, etc., instead of them having to be deployed down to Sicily to try and drive the Royal Navy out of the way so that the convoys could be getting through to North Africa, they could well have been up in Norway, or could have been taking on the Soviet Union in the Barents Sea. There's all sorts of things which, in the initial clash, could have made a big cumulative difference. Nighthawk Production says the Type 21 U-boat lack of deck gun a mistake to you. I'm not writing Roman numerals, sorry. Yeah, so you mean the XSI. Surely deck gun is the only good weapon when your enemy's ASW is comparatively poor. Well, the trouble is that means that the Type 21 U-boat is entirely dependent upon its torpedoes, which are expensive, and you can carry far less of them than you can shells for your gun. So you can take out far less merchant ships. So it's not a failure, it's a natural result of what's going on in terms of amphibious anti-submarine warfare. But it is a realization that the submarine is actually put in a weaker position than it was at the beginning of the war. Hi, KGB. Nero Ness, Dr. Clark, what's your view of Ruskell's official histories? Is there a book to read as companion to then fill out the gaps, like with regards to Ultra? Not yet. There isn't. I've heard work that there might be one done. There might be a companion done, which might have chapters, written by different authors. I'm hoping that if they do it, that I get asked to do one of the chapters. Danny Freeman, would a deck gun be enough to sink a modern merchant ship? I'm not sure a single anti-ship missile could put a torpedo, but a torpedo can break the ship's back. Torpedo can break the ship's back. A armor-piercing deck gun shell could possibly, but then you'd have to surface your nuclear submarine. And really, do you want your nuclear submarine on the surface? No. Gary, are there any books on the Dido class out there? Something I'd love to read more on, but seems quite lacking material. Let me look into that. Ask me on Sunday. I'll answer one question. It is very easy to sink modern merchant ships. Yes and no. Danny Phillips, I'm thinking of writing a history book either on bayonets, the Paul Dalton Defiant, or HMS Ajax. Which would you recommend on starting with research for the latter? What would you recommend? If I'm starting research on HMS Ajax, I'm going to the National Archives and I'm looking up the list of officers and stuff. And all the technical details, all the stuff around her procurement. Leander class, it's all in the National Archives. Seamwhite, growth of technical needs got a lot of civilians into the command, so non-military view adds to strategic good or bad. Yep. Sean it really shows how deep the US officer pool was when Fletcher is your third stringer for your fleet command. You're doing very well for yourself. Well, that's the case. If the Royal Navy also is doing quite well for itself by the end of World War II. But the trouble is, it's doing well for itself and having enough to do that sort of thing the Americans are doing in terms of putting in rotating the fleet commands. And that's the problem. Rotating fleet commands is something different. It requires even more, and they have an advantage in that if you consider how many theatre commanders does the Royal Navy have, how many fleets does the Royal Navy have around the world, in the versus where are the American fleets mostly orientated? Where are their majority of their forces orientated? They're all in one campaign, whereas the Royal Navy's spread around the world. I think if the Pacific War had gone on for longer, you would have seen the British adopt that policy, yes. But, you know. Richard Hughes, where did the China Station move after the fall of Singapore? China Station becomes the Eastern Fleet. But the China Station was always going to become the Eastern Fleet in World War II. Eastern Fleet was supposed to be centered on Singapore, though. That's the thing. There is a good video on YouTube explaining that Hitler always chose ideology over military advice and why Hitler declared war on the US. I just said Hitler, that's going to be from YouTube. Well, leaving that to one side, there are lots of people who like to... Okay, this is difficult for me to say. You do not get to the position he managed to get to if you are, in a ways, stupid. I'm not saying he was smart, and I'm not saying he made the right decisions. In fact, I think he's a SHIT. But you don't get to that. So I think sometimes there is a lot of stuff put at his feet which is not really on him. It's on other people who are blaming on him because that's better than it being on them. Stafford Thompson, Dr. Mixing more concrete now. Oh, not sure if I'll be able to say when it's time. So we'll stay. I hope you have a pleasant evening, and thank you again for yet another educational and sharing live chat. Enjoy, and good luck with the concrete. I know from own experience how fun that is. Martin Doherty, Germany starts the war in 44, Plan Z is complete, and then Japan enters the fray. Italy stays neutral. How do you think that scenario works out for the RN? Ooh. Well, in 44, if Plan Z is complete, there is also the Royal Navy's plans, which are complete. You're dealing with a force which is thrown off in nicest way the naval treaties in about 1937, 38, completely. So by 1944 has had 7 years of Royal Navy building without worrying about treaty limits. Do you really want to take on a Royal Navy like that? You've got the Tiger-class battleships for starters, the big ones. As I always call them Tigers, but they're Lion-class, aren't they? I just prefer Tiger, it sounds cooler. You will have probably a lot more Didos in service, probably a lot more large fleet destroyers in service. because the tribals would have proved themselves very useful by this point in exercises. You would have a larger destroyer force, a larger submarine force, and you would have had, let's be honest, because they were beginning, whether the war started or not, a whole lot of flowers in service. So the Royal Navy in 1944 would have been a Royal Navy with a huge number of escorts ready to bushwhack you. Would the Germans have pushed their technology on as much as they would have they did in wartime? Would they be fielding the Type 21 or equivalent submarine in 1944 or not? There's so many what ifs in this scenario. Basically, it's an interesting war. If Italy stays neutral and you're just fighting Japan and Germany, well, the Americans will join any war which Japan gets in. So if Germany, so then you have Japan, Germany versus America and UK, and that's just not fun for either of them. Right then, Schumach, they did that. It was funny. Martin Dorothy, but true. But if you have a full German Plan Z fleet deal, then a full Japanese fleet. A full Japanese fleet is going to also be facing against a full American fleet and a full British fleet. That's the problem. You're dealing with 4 full fleets at this point. If the war starts in 1944, you're dealing with 4 navies which have all evolved. Who's going to have done a better evolution? Well, the nicest way, the Royal Navy had far more carriers on the plan than the Japanese did. The Americans had more than the Brits did, even. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of carrier aviation going on. And if you look at Indefatigable and Implacable, well, if you consider how they're basically armoured carriers which can take an Ark Royal strike group. What do you bet the successors to them would have been like? And they would have been built. Eamon, the IJN is often called the sane part of the Japanese military. Is it because they didn't threaten to kill their senior officers much? Yes. That is pretty much it. They don't like to kill their senior officers as often. Vision, ideally for Japan, they sink 4 deployed US carriers and cruisers during a surprise invasion of Hawaii, while Battlefleet is in California. That would be a good time for them. Sure, Mac. Martin, Royal Navy laughs in being able to use the carrier fleet wants to. Yeah, the Royal Navy getting to use the entire fleet it wanted to and Henderson had planned. Woo! Happy days. Roboa, it's just getting worse and worse for the Japanese at this point. If they actually allowed the American ships not taken to escape Pearl Harbor, oosh, that's just bad. The whole point of taking Pearl Harbor is you stop those ships taking. If you manage to block those battleships in and those ship facilities in and take them, that puts a major dent in the US fleet. Jeff, what happened during Somerville's pre-war stint at East Indies? Not much. He does okay, but he hangs around with the Americans and wanders around there. Tries to build up a relationship with the Americans. Does some good stead later with Admiral King. Nyasa, IJ staffs tend to be educated in Japan or... That's true. Donald Ritton. Keen to learn more of my deceased father's ancestors at World War II plus Korea and Suez. Please advise a possible best solution. Also, how much detail will possibly be possible as able seaman rank? That would be go to the National Archives. They should have all the records. UK National Archives. Trent McCarthy, Doug Clark, what was the RN's opinion of the Americans' fast battleship classes? They liked them, but for the Americans, not for them. They felt they were very suitable for the American style of war. Which is rather a cutting phrase. Calvin Gasberg, in a war starting in 1944, you would have a Luftwaffe over ME-262, would you? With ironed out flaws and Fritz Hecht. Would you have those things? You see, those things are mostly developed at high pace in World War II, but also you have a scenario going on that what would be facing in terms of the Royal Navy, in terms of the British forces? You'd be facing a Hawker Sea Fury. Well, that takes out jets in Korea. What would that do to a 262? If you're talking, in the nicest way, when you're looking at these scenarios, yeah, you can go the Germans advance, but also the Brits and the Americans advance. So the Germans aren't going to be facing the same equipment in 1944 as they would have been facing in 1939, and neither the Brits and the Americans can. You're going to be, both sides are going to be developing, and in the nicest way, the biggest thing is going to be the British would have fixed the high-angle air defense system. And honestly, they would have probably 1942-ish have done a major refit of most of their destroyers to 4.5-inch guns. So you then have a very different scenario. Nihasa, no, Sean, you don't know. I don't use nearly the same username on Twitch or a shorthand one. You guys are on Twitch as well? There's Twitch going on here? Goodness gracious me. That's beyond my abilities. Right then, it is 15 minutes to go, so I will give that heads up. 15 minutes warning. Yeah, Donald Fritz, as you put it, the Japanese do have a lot of issues. Veteranissimi, war in 1944 sees the Allies in meteors and P-59s, P-80s. The only self-guided bomb on the Allied side. Plus better warships and more and better electronics on the Allied side. Yeah, well, that's the other thing. The radar development on the Allied side was far outpacing. And as would have the ASDIC development. If Type 14B had been in service from the beginning, that's a big problem for submarines. Dan Phillips, when would the Swordfish have been replaced if the Germans hadn't caused a ruckus? Probably 1940. Albacores was supposed to be coming in, but honestly, if you don't have World War II start, you probably managed to get the Barracuda working properly with a sensible engine supply line and engine line. So in a nice way, you could have had ferry Barracudas from the beginning of World War II if you hadn't started in 1944. Barracudas and Furies, I'm thinking. Thank you, Richard. Take care. Michael Truitt, N3 battlecruisers converted to aircraft carriers. Ooh, this is all getting very nice and very fun what if history. I have to say, I enjoy some what if history. I like it as a thing to look at the real history. That's the point. You can also illuminate stuff if you're looking at the questions of what could have happened. Sean Mack, we are involved in PBM of War in the Pacific, which is where we interact the most. Well done. Cheers, Doc, and cheers, guys, for your input. Take care. Mm. Yeah, there is the bat being developed by the Americans as well. Benefits. How did the various navies choose the food on ships? Is it at the ship level, or the decision made by the Harps? Sorry if I missed this as it was talked about a while back ago on the supply line stuff, and basically it's all organised centrally. Although you do have options for choosing what you're going to be cooking yourself, especially in a mess system. Vision, a later war is a big problem for the Axis powers. There is, in the nicest way, the Manhattan Project has a healthy dose of support from the British, which it might not have done if in a sort of pre-war scenario. So you could have had multiple sort of scenario projects. You might well have had access to sort of nuclear weapons. Could have been an interesting one. It might have been more general. Carmen Casper, wasn't Luftwaffe suspended a bunch of dummy programs during and because of Blitz? They did. They suspended a lot as well. So the nicest way, it's all sorts of things. British suspend stuff, Germans suspend stuff, Americans suspend stuff because war starts. So a lot of programs would have been carrying on. So a lot of interesting scenarios could have happened. Although we are far away from Somerville and Mers-el-Kébir and Force H, but you know. It's fun times. Dr. Clark, Daniel Freeman, what if history is interesting, but someone, can't remember who, said you can't go more than one or two scenarios away from real history without it going crazy? That is the problem. You change more than one or two facts and you've gone into a whole massive area of your basically fiction time. Daniel Freeman, while the Germans know they actually are very vulnerable to attack from east or west, so they need to win wars quickly. That they do. King's Rock, a Manhattan Project, and a lot of support from Canada. Yes, which would have been supporting Britain's one. Paul Johnson, is it the same for looking up merchant navy records, and what are the changes and charges National Archives charge? If you're going there in person, it's free. If you're doing it online, I think you do have to get some sort of thing. But if you're going in person, I know it's free because I go there quite regularly myself. Usually Saturdays when it's not lockdown time. Jay Richardson, the stupid thing about Manhattan Tube Allies is that Britain was 85% done but had no idea of reactor tech, no idea on reactor tech. USA was 15% done but focused solely on reactor stuff. It works together. But eventually one of them would have worked out the other stuff. Don't know if it's, does the later war mean we get to see more supercruisers like Alaska? Probably. And you probably get to see a Royal Navy cruiser with 10-inch guns. Probably. Because whilst we talked about 9.2-inch guns, I have a feeling a 10-inch gun would have come out for a new heavy cruiser. Mainly just to make sure it overpowered the 8-inch cruisers of the Japanese and really upset them. British were like to upset people. Anything that would force you to start thinking we're going to need to take our ships in and start altering them mechanically, technically, and engineering-wise was good for the British because it's a mission kill. Right then, it's 22 minutes past. I'm going to say any last questions. because I am really, really hungry. So far today I have had a chocolate brownie, some iron brew, and a lot of water. Mainly because I've been running on no sleep and adrenaline, which works quite well. Jerison, chicken-powered nuclear land? That's just weird. Vision, it was unfair for US not to share atomic bomb with US and Canada after war. Take care, and thank you. No, Darren. Thank you. Take care. Any last questions? Any thoughts? Or reuse the BL 9.2-inch Mark 11 in storage? It wasn't really that great a gun. It really wasn't. They had a 10-inch though, which looked a good idea. It was a nice idea. Basically, you'd have a double 10-inch for on the two forward guns and one on the rear, so you'd have 6 10-inch guns. And you'd have 4 double 4.5 inches, 2 on each side. So you'd have quite a one. Thank you, Dan Carlton. Take care and have a nice evening. Hope everyone's had a good time and hope you've all enjoyed it. My pleasure, Donald. Thank you very much to everyone, and thank you to all the super chats. Thank you to everyone for being nice. And you will catch me on Sunday for Brew Ships, which this Sunday Brew Ships is, if I check, I'm fairly sure I know what it is, but I want to check. Brew Ships on Sunday from 6 is Amphibious Warfare. So it's all the books I have on Amphibious Warfare, basically. Yay! It's going to be fun. And then next week we have the Battle of Malaysia. How could it have gone differently? So that is basically an entire what-if scenario. And Back Pocket Cruisers, my Tribals, Battles and Darings. And I will be putting up the next month's videos, the live schedule, up online probably tomorrow. Take care. Have a nice evening. Thank you very much to everyone who's been watching. Thank you very much for taking part. And hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. Right. Not sure if that's paused or if that's just me. Could be just paused. Right. Take care. Have fun. Enjoy. And notice this time the phone has not died. I made sure the phone was 100% charged before it worked. So, night Daniel, night John, night Greg, night Steve, night Stafford, night King's Rook, night Richard, and I will be logging into Discord whilst I'm watching Mysteries of the Deep later. So if you're watching that and you have any questions while I'm on while there, please message me on the Discord. Take care. Discord link is down the bottom.